Okay. Are we live? The question, never know. Okay, I think we timed it correctly this
Yes,
time.
we are.
Yes, I think we are. Yeah. Hello everyone. Frostbite, ya boy Thrawn, General Kenobi. Already getting some meme chats. Welcome to another Rokoko Office Hours. This is another special one. We have Loacher Films here with us as a guest,
Hey, everyone.
which, which is super exciting. And if you don't know Loacher, I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. But he is a YouTube content creator who's using the Rokoko suit and is one of the absolute like best users of the suit in terms of the quality of his finished animations. Truly AAA, could see it in any big video game cutscene animations, and he's using the Rokoko suit. And so today we're gonna it's mostly Star Wars and Halo and a couple other things sprinkled in there if you go way back. I remember when we were doing the user story. I forget there was a
Yeah.
couple other things that you could do in like for Steam what was Steam Video Maker? What is that? Right?
Source
Forge?
filmmaker. Source
Source
filmmaker.
Filmmaker. Right.
That's where I began. That's where I started like animating and
Warframe
doing all
stuff.
sorts of like
Right?
yeah,
Was there
yeah.
a
I
couple?
did like
Yeah.
Warframe, Star Wars. I did
Yeah.
some memes, some Team Fortress stuff. So like that's where I began
Yeah.
pretty much
Little
my
bit of
path in
everything.
animation.
And then has this amazing Witcher inspired music video. But yeah, incredible. So today we're going to make some free mocap as we have been doing for the past 10 or so weeks. And then we're going to, Locher's going to take it away and show us a little bit of the magic behind his workflow. And the other great thing about recording free mocap is we just launched. I'm going to give our contest spiel really quickly, but we just launched our perfect loop animation challenge. So I'll put a link. The link to this is actually in the description below. But I'm super pumped for this. This is a contest that we're running with like some amazing judges, all people that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, including William Foucher and Gavin Shapiro, the loop maker himself, the best one. It's a perfect loop challenge, but we have a ton of crazy prizes this time, which is something I'm really excited about. Just like first place in the two categories are $2,500 in cash plus full performance capture bundle. Um, and we have, let me look up, I want to get the exact details on it right here. Hold on a second. Um, but yeah, right. We have awesome. We have two categories: best render and best original concept. And once you enter a single entry, it's in the running for both. So six prizes total because we have first, second, and third for each of those categories. First is right $2,500 cash plus full performance capture bundle. That's a suit, gloves, face capture. Second place is a suit and face capture bundle. Third place is gloves and face capture and cash to spend in the motion library. And all you have to do is create a looping animation that uses a Rokoko asset in some form. And so you can either, if you don't have Rokoko hardware, which a lot of people don't have, you can use either the free assets on the motion library, which is our motion capture marketplace, or you can use assets from these live streams. We have about 120 assets we've made over the course of these, and Star Wars assets, and cricket assets, and dancing assets. So you can grab some of those. Link to those in the description below as well. And yeah, that's the spiel. And Locher, you're competing too.
Yes,
Um,
I am.
yeah, which will be, I'm excited to see. The cool thing about this contest that I really like is we're working with I think it's 30 or so pros like who are like Locher, and they're kind of in their own category competing against each other. So I don't know. For me, it can be intimidating when you're entering these contests. You're like, oh my god, I'm competing against Clint, or Gavin Shapiro for this loop, and like, no. They're gonna do their own thing, and then everyone else can battle it out for all the prizes. So should be good. Anyway, cool. That's. I think we can kind of get started again. Yeah. So let's record some mocap. So again, run of shows. We're
Okay.
gonna record mocap, and Locher, you're gonna be director, um, for me, and I think we can, I don't know, do Star Wars, some Star Wars mocap. I thought it might be cool to make like, usually I like to make at least 10 assets. So I don't know, maybe we could do like what assets you think you would need to do like a Star Wars scene, which like usually has a stormtrooper and a Jedi in it. Maybe we do a couple of those. I don't know. I also want to do ones that will like work with what you're going to show us in your workflow. Like I'm really curious about how you handle characters carrying weapons and stuff. So, um,
Okay. Uh, all right. So which one would you like to start with? I mean, I'm good with either,
I
so
I think
make a choice.
I think Star Wars. I think Stormtrooper.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I feel like that's usable in a lot of situations, and I don't know. I'm always throwing stormtroopers
Oh yeah, definitely. I
into
mean, we
things.
can record some great like general purpose animations,
Yeah,
that people can just drag and drop in a lot of places.
totally. Yeah. I think that's like that's always what I try and do a little bit. And we can also take some requests if people have specific things they want to see. Um, we could also do. I know that you have some interesting. You were telling me about like the way that you do um, your mocap recordings for like Covenant soldiers and things, like walking on your toes, um,
Yeah, yeah.
which is pretty interesting. So we could do.
And
I
I
don't know.
mean, we
Maybe we
can
do
we can
something.
just run through with that. I mean, that process of recording an animation for like a Covenant Elite and bringing it into Maya, seeing how the mocap links up with the rig, and like what's something that you need to pay attention to. We can absolutely like just run through the whole workflow and
Yeah,
see it from start to finish.
that would be awesome. I'd and then end up in Unreal. For people who don't know, while I'm just getting set up, maybe you could. I mean, I know. I think about your workflow, and I think we covered it in like the user story. But could you run through what you typically do to get like you got your Rokoko recording, and how do you get that into onto your character and into Unreal?
So once I have my recordings, the thing I do is, of course, like do the cleanup in like Rokoko Studio, all the filters
Right.
and such. But when I have all that done, I export them into an FBX file, and unlike I'm seeing this as the most popular workflow is that you create a human IK rig in Maya for like the character and then you import the animation to that. But I like to do it a bit differently because I have a different system that allows me a bit more fine tuning and control, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
And so the way I go about this is that I have a custom rig for my characters that I'm making like for every single character. I have my own animation rig with like FK and IK like limbs and stuff like that. And the way I do it is I use a lot of constraints and pretty much the whole workflow revolves around using constraints. So the things I pay attention to is I have like the two skeletons or like the two rigs pretty much, the motion capture rig and the character animation rig.
Right.
So what needs to line up are the ankles, like the feet, and the hips, because everything else is just pretty much following like orientation constraints. So it doesn't matter where the position is in the skeleton, but to get the correct movement in world space and to have the correct like
Yeah.
step distances and stuff like
Right.
that, you have to line up like the length of your
Right.
legs.
Because the hands don't
So
matter as much because it's in like there's not on a wall. It's not
yeah,
like
yeah,
your
they're
feet
free
need to
flowing and
be in a certain place. Right.
yeah, yeah, you have to be planted on the ground and you have to like move
Right.
according to like the motions that you have produced in your motion capture.
Yeah.
So those two things line up. I just parent the spine, I parent the hips to the motion capture skeleton, and I parent the feet to the motion capture skeleton, and I just orient constrain the rest of the rig. So they still follow the movements, but they stay in their own places. So like they follow
Right.
the rotation only, because that's
Right.
really all you need for a bone.
Yeah, they're not following the translation. It's just
Yeah,
inheriting the
yeah, it's just
rotation from the
rotational.
mocap data. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to look at. I imagine I mean, it sounds really intimidating, but I imagine maybe it's less, I mean, because you're just parenting constraint, parent nulls or whatever for your control rig,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So you just parent the null and then it's an FK rig up to the parented null. I don't know. Maybe it'll yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
pretty
look at
much.
it
I
in
mean,
Maya.
it like at first glance, the whole system just seems a bit intimidating. I'm gonna give you
Yeah.
that. Like that's a fair observation, but when you start using it and when you start setting it up, it's very straightforward because it's not like a really complex rig that like calculates like twists in the
Right.
arms and stuff like that. Like when you have twist bones, this is just for getting the basics across, and to build that, you have to get a bit of practice, but after that it's a breeze. You just have to put in the time, but it's not a
Yeah, right.
challenging.
And then you have your process and it works. So, I mean, again, I like your stuff is when people ask, they're like, "Can I see something?" 'Cause we have a lot of, I make stuff for Instagram mostly, right? And I'm not making short films. And so we get people who
Yeah.
are like, "Can you send me a really good example of your tech being used in the wild, like for a higher quality thing?" And I always point them to your stuff. And it's a lot of and cinematic captures too,
Cinematic
right?
capture.
Who has a similar, I believe, workflow. But anyway, what you are able to, the finished product you're able to get from the suit is like so good. So I think it's really
Hey,
interesting
thank you.
to well, and the other thing that you were mentioning offline is that you have like we're always talking about how there's problems with inertial motion capture that right I've like my hands are not clapping, and
Yeah,
your
yeah,
solution to that was to mess with the arm length
yeah.
of the actor profile. Oh, I didn't do this actually, right? You sent me the measurements and I didn't do this. So I'm going to make a new actor profile so it fits into your thing better. Right. So
Yeah,
hold on.
okay,
Let's
okay,
let
just
me do that. Did you send me that on Discord?
I think I sent it to you in an email, but
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
remember like the measurements because it's like,
Oh, you
and
remember.
I can
Okay.
also check, but
Here,
I
yeah, why
think
don't
it's
you
just
tell me?
like,
This is
yeah, I think
Loacher.
the height is, yeah, I have it right here. So the height is 182,
Nice.
and the arm span is 200.
So we'll
Yeah.
okay. So let's hold on. I'm so curious. I want to see if this messes with my because this is not my height, right?
Yeah, yeah. Still,
No, it doesn't
don't
make any
forget to
difference.
reparent your control, like your inputs to the new
Oh,
profile.
right. Oh, thank you. Of course. Yeah. Hold
But
on.
this is like sort of like my sort of proportions that I've
Right.
worked
Right.
with,
But I
so it might
but
not translate the same for you.
we'll see. Yeah, I think that
Yeah, yeah.
it will probably be fine. Um, just curious. And otherwise, we'll just have to scale it up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it looks okay. Well, let's see if we notice anything. I'm like trying to see if I notice that my arms are. I'm really excited to play with because this is just a hack for people who are, people who are constantly. Well, this is pretty good. Look at that. I'm touching my.
Yeah.
But people want it to have. And the thing is with inertial motion capture, I know we're not the only suit that does this. It's like it's hard to make it perfect because it's not tracking in real. It's not in a volume, right? You're not tracking the absolute
Yeah, yeah.
position. It's like it's all based off of just the measurements. Yeah, it has to match. Your body has to match the thing perfectly. And anyway, but
Yeah,
this
but
is
that stems from the nature of inertial mocap. You have great input like from the sensors itself, but in the end, it's
yeah.
like a software thing that calculates the rest of it. So it's not an absolute position, so you won't get one-to-one accuracy, but it's pretty good. I mean,
It's pretty good actually. This is even. I wonder if longer arms. Wow. Anyway, okay. Let's make some mocap.
one thing you should try is just crouch down and put your elbow on your knee and see how that
Oh,
fits.
what is
Because for me,
interesting?
like that was the one thing that I
Like
really wanted
like
to get right.
this
Because for
or
some reason,
like this?
uh, yeah, like that.
Oh
So yeah,
wow,
putting
look
your
at
elbow on
that.
your
Look at
knee.
that. That looks like pretty good. I mean, I think it would probably look pretty good the other way, but maybe not. This is interesting. I'm gonna change my yeah, that's okay, anyway. Let's let's do it. What should we do first? let's do some. Okay, we're doing stormtrooper stuff. And sorry for the lag as well, and it also might be pixelated, everyone. We're gonna repost this as a, as a full video in like 4K. This is just the best streaming situation that we found that allows us to do that. So it will be reposted in its perfection probably on Monday or something like that. Okay, so yes, what should we do? Stormtrooper, like an idol? Should we just
Stormtrooper.
start with an idol?
Yeah, we should start with an idol. So the thing that I try to remember when I'm recording my Stormtrooper motion capture is that due to how the armor is structured under like the arms, you can't really put your elbows next to your body. So it's always like you sort of lift your elbows away.
So kind
And
of like, is
because
it
of
like
like how the plates move, your body's a
right?
bit more stiff, you know. Like those are the things that I try to pay attention to. But yeah, so the elbows are a bit, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So do you use props when you record? Do you like have a prop gun that you use?
Yeah. I have like this old airsoft
Nice.
M4
Yeah.
that's like completely stripped, so it's just the shell, but it works just fine. You know,
So
just
this
for
is
having something in my hand to act it
yeah,
out with.
yeah. So this is I don't know, is this an E11? Isn't that what they use?
Yeah.
E11 blasters? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You got
Um
that right.
yeah. Okay. So like this, so just maybe I'll just do some like
Yeah. And
turning.
one thing I did notice is that stormtroopers sort of move, at least in my interpretation, move a bit like robots. So it's not like they move like their whole body when they're looking at something. It's sort of like tracking with their heads most of the time, like when guarding. So you hold a stiff position and then you track with your head, you know, because it's really menacing when you have this statue that's tracking you with just its head and just its face looking at you. So it sort of gives that robotic, menacing vibe to the stormtroopers.
Okay, so how about like just some looks and then like shifting my weight and then just
Yeah,
going
yeah,
back
yeah,
to looking. And I like also this is like I could imagine a perfect loop. I don't know what you're planning on. I know you haven't dug into it yet, but like a loop is I like the constraint because it's like, well, you could have a stormtrooper. It's easy to do like an idle of a stormtrooper looping, and then a little robot, and then a little mouse bot runs by, and you have a perfect loop. Like, yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. I feel like this could be used for something. Okay, so I'm gonna record. Let's do it. Stormtrooper idle. Nice and simple.
Perfect.
Any notes?
No, that was perfect. You
Anything fun?
got the motions, you got the movements perfectly right. And actually,
Yeah, that
like
should
I
be fine.
have a prop that sort of helps me when I think about like stormtrooper movements and like moving my head and stuff like that, because I have like this helmet replica in my room. So if I want to think about movement, I can just put it on.
Oh
So
wow.
let me show you.
Yeah, grab it. Man, this is okay, Rokoko, I need a helmet budget now. Trigger discipline. Dutch. I don't know what that means. I like your funny words, magic. Oh wait, I like magic words that are being said here, even though nice. Hello, Dutch. Yeah, they're magic. Oh, hey, it's a stormtrooper.
Hey.
Oh, interest. It doesn't have a voice thing on it, right?
No. It's just the plastic. It's just
It's
the
kind of
plastic. I hope you know
naturally
your just like
though.
that.
Yeah, it's giving you a stormtrooper vibe, just kind of
Yeah.
through the
So
plastic.
when I put this on, like I can imagine, you know, like moving my head, and when I try to look to the side, sometimes I have to like sort of tilt my head because otherwise
Right.
I'd be hitting my shoulder with like the bottom of the helmet.
Yeah. It's a classic
So
problem in CG. The helmet, armor, clipping, arm,
yeah,
especially with mocap, right? Is you're always running into that where it's clipping. The armor's supposed to be moved. Do you use physical? I think you use physical like physics on the armor pieces, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I did
that's
experiment with
awesome.
that.
Yeah,
But that's like really simple to do in Unreal. You
right.
just
You just
create a physics asset and then you just give it a rigid body sim and that's it. It's
yeah, and
handling the
socket
rest.
it onto the arm or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one. That's a good stormtrooper. Should we do another idle of sometimes? Maybe like move along, kind of thing, or I don't know. What do you think? Actually, I
Yeah,
may
yeah.
stop talking.
Having that move along type of thing would be great. Or we can have the stormtrooper like sort of like checking the documentation of people coming through. So
Mm.
you have the gun, someone is coming through, you take that like the holo chip, look at it, give it back, move on. Sort of like a checkpoint. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do they're passing like behind them. So I'll be like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. See, this is the theme of our mocap now. We need to set up a stormtrooper checkpoint within like
okay,
10
yeah,
motion capture.
totally. That's perfect. Yeah, that's great.
So
Right.
we're gonna
Okay.
have someone patrolling back and forth, a walk
Okay.
cycle of someone walking past. So
Smart.
we're getting there, we're working it.
Yeah,
This is the
exactly.
magic.
This is great. And then a Jedi pops in and kills everyone. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, yeah, just the usual Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, use a little Star Wars stuff. It's dangerous. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna do another straight pose, but yeah, this is perfect. I like that we've built a little scene here. It always it always helps when you have props, when you have an idea of a scene, like doing that extra little work. I think always is helpful. Okay,
Yeah.
here we go. Okay, I think that's good.
Yeah,
That's
perfect.
long. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
we can
good.
just use like separate, like parts of that for different characters.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, like the just the idle guys can be two stormtroopers, with the timing slightly offset, and then you
Yeah,
have you
yeah,
have two characters.
yeah. And you have
Okay,
like two stormtroopers standing. So you have like two guards and two at like the entrance. So they're
right,
doing the same animation that you've just recorded, but at different like time
right.
offsets. So it looks like they're doing their own unique thing.
Should we do someone that's like on a console? Maybe like in the
Yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah. And
room.
I've also seen in chat that we have like a request for
Ooh,
or someone doing like like holding the earpiece or
oh
talking
yeah.
like that.
So okay, let's just do an idle, and then they get a communication.
Okay.
Like so I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Kind of thing. And
Perfect.
also, there's
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
put your
Let's do
hands
that.
together like this? This has definitely not been fixed, and it won't be fixed anytime soon. Unfortunately, that's just going to be a reality of inertial motion capture. But you can maybe mess with the actor profile a little bit, as Loacher has done, to get it closer. But it's never going to be perfect. Definitely not. Well, actually, we are playing with things to make that maybe work in beta, but we're not there yet. Certainly not there yet. Okay, let's do comm link communication idle. Oh, this
There
is
we go.
okay. Again, this would be
Sounds
something
great.
that you would just fix right in post because it's not going to be touching the helmet in the right place and Oh God.
Yeah, that's just something that you correct for, like in Maya or your
Yeah.
software choosing, like in your 3D package.
Yeah. Right. Cool. Okay. Looking good.
We could have
Okay.
one who's let's imagine it like this. So this is like the gate of the checkpoint, and we like this is where the two guards checking the entrance are, and these are the two that are standing idle. And we have like these two sort of bastion-like structures, and on top of that we have troopers overlooking the front of the checkpoint. So we have someone just holding the gun at the ready, like sort of aiming down at the people below them.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
Totally.
that high, not that high. Just just like chest height, being ready to raise the weapon and start shooting. If like the rebels try anything.
But looking
So
down.
yeah, people up there on the lookout, looking down,
Cool. Oh man.
observing
Yeah.
the crowd.
Awesome. Oh, I'm pumped. This is like, and then I don't know. You use Quixel for a lot of your stuff, right? Do you just grab, or do you have custom Star Wars like towers that you use, or?
Oh, it's sort of a mix of both.
Yeah.
So for my natural models, so like rocks, terrain,
Right.
stuff
You
like
go to
that, I
Quixel
use
for that.
Quixel. And sometimes I source my materials from Quixel. But for instance, with my enemy, the entire Imperial base was like a custom model that I've made like from
Wow.
several parts. So I have like the main structure, like separate variations for the bridge and the underside of the bridge, and these wave breaker triangle shaped columns and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So the whole thing was custom modeled and procedurally textured in Unreal.
Oh, in Unreal. That's what I was gonna ask. Was it
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Unreal or in Maya? Because you're a Maya person. Wow.
I mean,
Huh.
the models were made in Maya, but the texturing itself was
Okay.
sort of
Oh, okay.
I made masks in Substance Painter, but the textures themselves were applied in Unreal in like a procedural manner based on the
Right.
masks that I have created.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting though. You can use Unreal for more and more these days.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So this is on the bridge, looking down.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just chest high, having the weapon at the ready.
Maybe it's a bigger weapon. Yeah. Trying to end it in such a way that they could be looped,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
which is kind of nice too. That would honestly be a cool loop, even.
yeah. Just an Imperial checkpoint.
It's an Imperial checkpoint with people coming through. And you just do like a
You've
line of people.
brought light to my master plan is to have you record all the
Yeah,
mocap with
yeah,
my
that's
direction and
great.
then
That would
just
be
submit
awesome.
that.
I would love that. That would be great. Okay, so that's a bunch of troopers. Should we do the people walking through now? Or should we do a patrolling trooper? Which is, I'm
Yeah,
also
just
curious to
just
know how
a
you handle. I mean, Rokoko walking is bizarrely one of the things, of course, we struggle with a little bit. So I'm curious how you deal with that. It's always so much easier, I find, like really natural walking is kind of hard to get to make work, but anything that's like stylized looks really good, you know?
yeah.
That like looks perfect, but then you get the little bumps. I don't know. I sometimes I lower the hips and it gets rid of the snapping a little bit, but anyway.
Usually, how I deal with that is I do some additional cleanup in Maya when it comes to like all that bobbing down, up and down, and a bit of the jumps and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
right.
It's
You just
And
gotta
I've
do a little
also
cleanup.
found that it's a good workaround that like the Foot IK filter in like Rokoko Studio. I know it's supposed to be like, okay, you have your legs pretty much stationary for the entire animation. But what I've found is when you have a walk cycle and you use the Foot IK, the smoothing setting, like setting it to a 4, will actually help you with a bit with the bumps.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm
So it's
learning.
it's sort of like, I know this is not for this, but it works.
Yeah, if it works, it works. That's great.
Yeah, if it works,
That's
it
interesting.
works.
I never mess with the amount of foot IK that I'm using. It's always the one. Huh. Okay, well, should I do patrolling stormtrooper?
Yeah, yeah, just just a couple of steps like that. Yeah.
Gonna have to move back here. Okay, cool. I'll try it. Let's see how it goes. Oh, I am gonna do a straight pose again. Okay. I wish I need a little bit more room.
Yeah, see, that's why I record outside.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, he's just guarding the smallest. He's in front of a door. That's big enough for a
Yeah,
door.
yeah, yeah.
He's just
Or
kind of
he
drifting.
could be up on like this guard tower as well.
Yeah, totally.
Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just walking between the two corners of it, and then you're
Yeah,
just supposed to just bob the head down a bit.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that'll need some cleanup for sure. That actually doesn't look too bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's five. Okay, let's do people passing through the checkpoint now. So like walking up, kind of dejected, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I have my thing in my hand maybe already. So I just
Yeah. And like intimidated, like,
and then walk by. Cool. Okay.
I mean, not that so here's what I think we should do for like these intimidated people, like the settlers of this planet that the empire is currently oppressing.
Yeah.
So what we should do is that they don't like bend too much down, but they are very careful in their movements, like not to make any sudden movements and stuff like that because they don't want to get
Right.
shot. You know,
Right.
trigger happy stormtroopers, like that's a recipe for disaster. So like they are sort of like they have this little bit of a hunch, but they're not like bobbing down too much. They're just like very careful, very with their movements. Like
Yeah.
sort of
Shorter
trying to play
or
it safe.
same height as the stormtrooper, or are they looking up a little bit? Maybe we
I
could do
think they
two of
can
them.
be the same height because the stormtroopers like menacing power isn't in like their height. Because they are come in all shapes and sizes, but it's sort of like the armor and what they represent.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think even if you're like 6'2", a 5'7" stormtrooper will intimidate you because he has a gun and he's part of a tyrannical regime.
Yeah. And there's a star destroyer you can see like next to your moon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Try and do it in my limited space here. That's the only bummer. Hold on, let me see. I want to move this. Oh, try and open up the door a little bit here. Get as much runway as I can. Okay. Let's try it. Kind of
Perfect.
walking. Yeah,
Love it.
it's okay. You just cut to a different camera when they walk out of frame, and it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
I'm like walking around my chair. Um, Maybe we could do like a big kind of a monstery type, more hulking, like more of a like I don't know, an alien of some sort.
We could. I mean, that would be like an interesting addition. So let's do one more Star Wars animation, and then let's do a couple of Halo ones, and then we're gonna run
Yeah,
through like the
yeah,
motion
yeah, yeah.
capture cleanup workflow.
Definitely,
So
definitely.
you mentioned like this monster. Let's do an alien in this scene because Star Wars are like we have
Yeah,
aliens in Star Wars. So
What type? What do you think?
let me just real quick. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So like lumbering, slow movements,
Yeah,
a bit less intimidated. You know, they are a bit less intimidated by the stormtroopers because they have
right.
the mass to throw one across the
Totally.
room,
That's what I'm
but they
thinking.
still
I'm
don't
thinking
want any
like a
trouble.
right. Yeah. They don't want any trouble, but like blaster's not going to work for me. You're going to have to bring out the big
Yeah,
guns
yeah,
because I
yeah.
got thick
Let's do a
hut
Wookiee. Let's
hide.
just do a Wookiee.
Yeah, just a straight up Wookiee. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's like that's like
Yeah. The Wookiees are looking down. Yeah.
yeah, right. A Wookiee who escaped. Don't mess with this
And
Wookiee.
here's
Okay, here
what
we go.
I think something that you should do because like Wookiees like to assert their dominance. So when you walk up to the guy who's taking your chip, before you don't just straight up hand it to him. You like look around and then you look down and hand it to him. So you observe the surroundings first and then you hand it to him because you don't care about the stormtrooper. He
Right.
can't hurt you. It's an
Cool.
inconvenience for you.
Yeah, right. I'm yeah, okay. Hold on, let me do another straight pose. Okay, let's record. Wookiee energy. Yeah,
Perfect.
running out of room. Running out of room there. Okay, and then I got to do a obligatory superhero landing. Jedi pulls out his lightsaber and slashes somebody to death because I just want to have that recorded anyway.
Okay, let's close out with that, and then let's move on to the elite
Yeah,
mocap.
yeah. Okay, one more. Force pull that lightsaber off my belt and just start murdering. Okay, here we go. I don't know.
There we go.
Just a little fun.
Now we have chaos at the checkpoint.
Now
We've
we have chaos
established
as
the
a
order, and then we
checkpoint.
just kicked it in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then yeah, that doesn't loop anymore. Okay, so let's try and do some of these Covenant soldier animations, and then you can kind of show
Yeah,
us how you've
yeah.
been.
So the way I record the elites is they have like this weird shape of the leg, you know, like an extra
Right.
joint is in there.
They have like the
And the
avian.
way I
Right. It's
get
like yeah. Right.
so
Sorry.
sort of like a horse, you know, sort of
Yeah.
like how a horse's leg well, a horse's leg looks like. So yeah, that's what I do is like I stand on my toes because it gives me sort of a different way of balancing myself, and I usually just put my legs a bit more forward when I'm walking.
Oh God. You
Yeah,
put your legs
it's a
forward.
killer. Like it's a killer on your toes, but in the end, it looks great.
Like that kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you can just bend forward a little, you know, because
Oh, just
they have
bend
like these
forward. Okay.
long necks facing forward. So they're sort of like, you know, looking around like this, very smooth movements, but also, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel like they're a
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah,
springy.
yeah. You got the bounce. You got the
Yeah.
bounce. That's good.
Okay. Let's try and just do like an idle looking around, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do an idle, and then let's do like a short walk so I can walk through the cleanup steps.
Right. Okay, let's do it. Okay, we'll
That's
see how
good.
that. Yeah, it was okay. I couldn't stay still. I was like trying to stay still, but it's easier when you're
Yeah, yeah.
walking
It
around.
took me a while to get used to it, but now I can like run, jump, and do all that stuff like on my toes. So I had to get used to that because for like one of my films, the first one that I used the smart suit for actually, like Return was a Halo short that I used the smart suit for first time, and
Right,
for that one I needed the elites to run, and it was
right.
really weird having to figure out like how to actually move only on my toes when I'm running.
Yeah, it's amazing. You forget how much once you get a suit and you start working with it, you're like, oh wow, acting is a real skill that is
Yeah,
difficult. Conveying stuff through motion is like there's a reason there's a whole industry around it because I don't know. It's a talent. It's like difficult to do.
exactly.
You feel very self conscious and yeah,
And
especially
once you start recording your action, you realize I need a workout.
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. It starts killing you. Um, okay, I'll try. What do you think?
Great,
Try it
looks great.
again.
Let's try one more with a bit less of like up down bobbing and sort of
Okay.
like trying to stay balanced the way you put your feet forward and stuff like
Right.
that. So not so much up down motion, but you always move as in a stable motion because the
Okay.
elites in Halo are sort of like a noble species, so they have like this
Oh,
very
right.
refined set of motions.
I'll try and really get up on my toes. Okay. Let's try it.
Great.
Yeah, it's tough, man. That is difficult to balance. Clean up some of this. Yeah. Cool. Should we do it? I kind of I don't want to hold you for too long, so I feel like we should clean this up and get it over to your side.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. Cool. Hold on. Well, let's do we'll do cleanup right now. I'm just gonna lower down my little desk here. Okay. So what should we actually? Because I don't think we'll be able to build the entire scene. I mean, unless you want to do that. But we could just grab a couple of like the stormtrooper animations, or should we just clean them all up?
I think we should start with like the elite and then work our way forward. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Or you know what I could do too is while let's start with the elite, and I'll send that over to you, and then we can just take a look at that in general, and then in the background I can be cleaning some of the other stuff just so people don't have to
sounds
sit
great.
through that. Okay. So let's. I think that last elite one was the best. Um, yeah, high heels would probably honestly help. Um, okay, so I'm just gonna do some quick cleanup here. Everyone clean. Oh, that's the wrong leg. Clean your mocap. It's very important. Boom. Boom. Rokoko mocap works off of foot contact with the ground, So you always need to kind of go through and just make sure what you did like matches what the suit registered. Usually it's not a lot of work, but it does make a massive difference. You can see this picked up really well. Don't need to clean this really. This is probably one. This is always where I get really silent when I'm cleaning and weird. I
That's
try
right.
and keep talking on the stream. Okay. Boom. I think. Do you generally have a harder time doing cleanup when you're like doing walks like this?
Yeah, I mean, because my toes are a lot closer to the ground when I'm doing it,
Yeah.
so it registers as like a foot plant a lot more.
Okay, so foot IK. Okay, so that's my locomotion cleaned. Now for foot IK, um, you turn it on and you just move this down. To
No, no, no. Go like to the settings of it without like placing a keyframe. There we go. And so what I do is smooth set to no, no, just four.
oh, four.
Yeah, yeah, four. And the blend transition I usually turn off. I find that it
Interesting.
gives me a better result when I'm moving around.
Huh. Fascinating. I've never done that before. Oh wow, that's looking good. Yeah, you can see my stumble there. So you can maybe just use like those bits.
Yeah. I mean, we can just smooth it out in like post, so
Yeah.
it works.
And then do you use drift fix normally or
Sometimes, yeah.
I like to
But
check it if I'm moving around. Yeah, that looks fine. Yeah, don't need it. Cool. I think this looks fine. I don't know. Is there anything else you would do to it? That's pretty much all I would ever do.
no, I think that looks great. That looks great for now.
Halo, Elite, Walking. Cool. Okay. And so what do you use for export settings? You're doing an FBX. Do you include the body mesh?
No, no, I usually don't.
Yeah, don't need it.
And
What's about your
yeah, human
skeleton?
IK is fine. Human IK, yeah.
Do you change the FPS or do you normally keep it at 100?
Since I always bake it down to a fix like 30 on my rig, it doesn't really matter what frame rate I export.
Yeah, me neither. I always leave it at 100 just in case. I mean, you would just, the thing is, it's always easy to go back in and re-export it if you needed to. But
Yeah, yeah,
if I don't see it as being a, usually it's not going to slow down your footage if you throw it into a 30 FPS
yeah.
timeline. Like, you can get that effect if you want it, but generally, I don't find it ever to be a problem with duped frames or skipped. It looks fine. I don't know for me. Um, Okay, so I'm gonna pop that into the Discord chat between us, and then I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Loacher, boom, boom. Okay, here, FBX is in there, and I am going to stop my
Yes.
screen share, and I'm going to. Can I disable my camera for a moment? I just want to change. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna stay in my suit. I'm fine.
Trooper, a two trooper.
I'm a true trooper. Indeed. Okay.
Okay.
Move that. But yeah, you can share. I think you should be able to share
Yeah.
your. Oh, no, I gotta keep
One
it zipped up.
second.
And you know what I do sometimes? Actually, hold on.
Just a quick second. Okay. So I'm gonna share my Maya screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so first I'm gonna show the rig that I'm using for the Elite, and then I'm gonna show like how it's paired up with the motion capture data and stuff like that.
Sweet. Okay, hold on.
So
Before you start, for people, because again, this might be a little pixelated because we're streaming at 720. We will re-upload this in 4K where you'll be able to see everything. And but but yeah, and for those of you who are just joining, we're about to watch Loacher go through his workflow with Rokoko motion capture to some of the models he works with. Anyway, okay, sorry. Okay, let's go through it. Now, this is the good part. This is like I'm very excited about this because I'm very curious about what you're about to do. Okay, so he's not in a T pose. I'm gonna ask so many
No, no, no.
questions. I apologize.
So this model is exported from the game Halo Reach. So this is like the
Okay.
default pose it comes in, and that's what I rigged it in.
Okay, actually, hold
But
on and stop. I already have questions. Okay, okay. So you got a model that was rigged, right? It was
yeah,
rigged with bones, and it came in this
yeah.
pose. Okay,
So that's the skeleton for it.
that's right. Okay, that's the skeleton. So it came rigged, and then you went in. Okay, now I'll stop talking. I'm sorry. I'm a bad interrupter.
It's okay. So what I did was I took the skeleton and I built a set of controls around it with like IK chains and stuff like that. So if I show the also like separate hip controls, so I can just do this if I want to, if I just want to fine tune my animation. So I can move the hips without like affecting the rest of the rig.
Right.
But I've got like a bunch of bone chains here hidden, which are for the IK, the FK controls and stuff like that. Obviously, there's like a calculation going on with the IK chain. So the two FK and IK chains affect the bones that you see here, like the bones left leg group, and that group is like that chain is what gets transferred to the skeleton of the character, because on this chain I have constraints set up which are influenced by these controls, where I can switch between the FK and IK controls. And I don't want to set up these constraints on my skeleton with like the different weights and stuff like that, because that
Right.
would be like a nightmare. But
You want to add a
doing it
layer on
within the
top
rig
of
makes
that.
it easier to transfer. At least for me,
Right.
it's like a simpler system to understand.
So I mean, this is a very you have a very specialized rig, right? And so I imagine you've gotten it to a point where you have this all pre-built and you're just lining up these controllers to like you get a new, let's say there's a new elite model that comes out. You got to redo this
Yeah.
process. Are you doing everything from scratch, or do you have something that's built that you then are like, okay, the arms are going to they're slightly longer, so I'm just going to move the arm controllers and then engage everything, or like, would you have to build it from scratch each time?
It's sort of in the middle, so I can't use this exact rig on a different skeleton, but what I can do is just keep the controls, like, the everything that you see pretty much on the screen right now, and I switch out the bones under that,
Right.
and I
Right.
reposition the controls to the new skeleton, and that's how the two like adapt together and sort of like mesh together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this rig has controls, so I can switch between FK
Oh,
and
so
IK. So
crazy.
now I'm in an FK chain, and if I move like the hips, I'm gonna move both arms. If I want to set this to an IK, there we go. Now that's an IK chain. So it's
Wow.
a really
Gosh.
simple but versatile rig that I can
Yeah.
use for my animation cleanup.
I mean, that's awesome. It looks so useful. I mean, this is something that like I probably will never do, right? But I imagine a lot of the principles of what you're of the workflow can still be transferred over to like a more standard control rig. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if you can on Maya's standard control rig if you can swap between FK and IK. I don't know.
You probably
Interesting.
can.
You
I
probably
haven't really
can.
dug that deep into human IK myself, but I'm gonna say you probably can, because that's like a
Yeah.
pretty basic feature to have when it
Yeah.
comes like to animating. But so this is this is the default pose. This is the like the nullified pose of the rig. So if I reset it, this is the pose I get.
This is the rest
But
pose or whatever.
yeah. So this is the rest pose. But when it comes to motion capture, I actually have it adjusted like this, and you can see the
Interesting.
motion capture skeleton under it. And you can see what
Yeah.
I talked about, lining the feet and the hips up. Those are like set up properly. But if I start moving this, it's gonna affect the leg because that's parented. And you can see that the positional data actually like the leg changes the translation as well as the rotation, like the feet.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to the arms, those are set up with on the FK chain with an orient constraint. So the position doesn't transfer. So I can just move this out
Right.
because there's a different hierarchy, different rest positions and stuff like that. But I need the orientation data transferred to the character.
So
And I
because
actually have.
so,
Yep.
sorry, no.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think it's so interesting that, again, so much of the I think a lot of people have problems with footsteps, and that's where a lot of cleanup happens, right? Because it's the one part of the body that's usually always interacting with a digital object, which means you can track if it's drifting a lot easier, right?
Yep.
And so what you've done essentially is so so the legs of this elite are positionally being moved by the leg data in the
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
if,
So it's the hips and the feet that are, or the toes in this instance, because we are walking on our toes. So it's the hips and the toes that really affect positional data. Everything else just gets the rotational data from the rig, because that's pretty much all I need to
okay,
have the arms, the spine, and everything else to work.
right, right, so that was my mini revelation is because you've made sure that the hips and the legs are at the same height, and I imagine the knee perfectly matches up.
That's not that
It's not
important,
as
honestly.
necessary. It's more just
No,
the
no.
amount of distance between that hip and that leg.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
then you have like correct step distances.
Right.
Like this is how much the leg can actually stretch when it's like fully stretched out. So that's what you
Right.
need to work in here. And you can also see that since the elites are really tall and they're much bigger than regular sized humans like me or you, the rig is like the skeleton is scaled up by like 25% to have the hips line up with
Which is
the
why the arms are above.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if I unlock these and just reset it to 1, so this would be the default sort of length of my legs if I imported the data, just raw. But this obviously doesn't work because the legs are way too squished together
Mm-hmm.
and it just looks weird. So you wouldn't move like this.
Right, because they would be
So
like crouching around. Their legs wouldn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
enough. Yeah.
yeah. So this is
It's,
more akin to actually, being upright.
this must have taken so much um, trial by error to get right, I imagine. Just like trying
Uh,
new things and then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know, maybe not.
I mean,
That's awesome.
originally when I was fiddling around with this system, it was sort of like, okay, trial and error, what works, what doesn't. But now I have like an understanding of what I should do, what I should try first, and then I can move from that.
Right.
But it's still like pretty much every model is a different thing. Every skeleton is a different thing on its own. So you always have to be there to sort of experiment and learn about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone is different. Yeah. Yeah. It's always
Yeah.
so frustrating. Okay, anyway.
And one additional thing what you could notice is that I have the scale locked right now. That's because when I import the animation from like the FBX that you just sent me, what it wants to do is override the scaling. And I don't want to, delete the scale keys and set it back up to 125 all the time. What I want to do is keep the scaling but import everything else.
So what you've
So,
done is you have a skeleton, probably an empty Rokoko human IK export
yeah,
skeleton, right? That's what you've scaled up to match. And the
yeah,
way
yeah.
that Maya works is that if I bring in a new animated skeleton that matches that skeleton, it'll just override, right? It'll
Yeah,
just
yeah, it's
add all
gonna
that
update.
motion. Yeah.
So if I drag it in right now, you see
So
that I
this
get this
is
notification that the scale is locked, and I just say keep all locked because that's gonna keep my settings in check. And if I disable the isolation now and hide the skeleton, you can see that I have no keyframes on it, but they became unlocked. So
interesting.
that's
Huh.
that's what happens when I import an animation. But if I hide it right now and I hide the rig as well, uh, and I set this to 30 FPS, so this is your motion capture on the Elite. And I have the fingers set up more or less as well.
Wow, it looks So what would happen if I hadn't been on my toes?
Um,
It would be like his back hind ankle would be like flatter, right, or something.
Not really. It would be the like the characteristics of your movement that would change because
Okay,
the first
so
time I
that's why you're
recorded
doing it.
these, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because the first time I recorded these motion capture files for Return back in 2020, I think that was a long time ago. Jesus.
I
So
know. Yeah, it's crazy.
what
Yeah,
I
the
did
time.
then was I actually had the foot controls parented to the feet of the Rokoko skeleton. And what I found out was that doesn't really work as great for my purposes, especially since I'm always walking on my toes. So that's my contact point with the ground. So
Right.
the feet always behaved sort of weird, you
Interesting.
know.
Yeah. So
So
it's
since
just
I'm
because
already on
that's
my
how they.
toes, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And the inspiration came from when you look at like behind the scenes footage of like any blockbuster movie or anything like that, what you see is, for example, when Andy Serkis was recording for like Planet of the Apes, he had these plastic extensions on his limbs because he
Right.
needed to like walk on all fours like a chimpanzee would. So that's where the inspiration came from. Okay, they are using these sort of prosthetics when they want to enhance or tweak like the actor's performance. I'm just gonna use my toes because I don't have the know-how to build prosthetics. But what I can do is change my movement by using my legs a bit weird.
Yeah.
So that's why I came up with like, okay, let's just use my toes, and it actually works. It sort of matches the let's say like the physics of this character.
Right. Which makes sense. Yeah. They move differently. It's
Yeah, like
it's
you can see that the
so
leg is a bit more forward, and
right.
that matches like this weird like leg structure, bone structure that we have going on.
Right. This like reverse avian. Yeah. Weird.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It looks very. I think it looks. Yeah. It looks pretty convincing. I mean, it looks pretty good. Okay. So this is. So you. A couple interesting things, right? You already have a skeleton that's been pre perfectly matched up with your model's rig.
yeah,
You're importing the mocap onto that skeleton, which is kind of a Maya thing,
yeah.
namespace thing, but it worked. But that's how we get here. And hello, Echelon, by the way. Hello, Frostbite and
Hey,
Alberto in the chat and everything. Good to see you. Yeah. Okay. So now, what else would you do in like the cleanup phase? You're doing an idol for this guy or whatever.
yeah. So what I do is I just go back to my frame zero because it's easier to select the controls when they're all spread out. And I just select the controls I have visible right now. And so
No
I'm gonna
fingers.
select the head and the root of the neck because I have like several parts of the neck, and I'm gonna talk about that in a bit because we can actually use the data we got from your neck on all three,
Of the neck
and I'm gonna
joints,
show you
and
how.
they'll propagate, like it'll be you'll get extra turn or whatever
Yeah,
if
yeah,
they
yeah, because
all
we need to
yeah
use like the entire length of the bone chain. We can't just use the base because then it looks a bit too stiff.
yeah
So we
that's
need that
interesting.
reptilian, movement. So I have the feet right there. I'm not gonna bake the toes because those are not affected by the Rokoko rig. Those are like for tweaking afterwards.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna select the hips, and I'm gonna go to key, bake simulation, and you know how it goes. Just by one sample rate, just bake the whole thing down.
So interesting. Yeah. So this would be on the human IK system. They have a button for bake to control rig or bake
Yeah,
to
yeah.
skeleton that does that. And then you
So
can
now I can actually just.
yeah.
Oh wait, I didn't bake break. Sorry, I didn't bake my fingers. So let's do that real quick. I'm gonna select the entire hierarchy for them and bake it.
Huh. And so this is a now I have a. Do you use smoothing filters? I think I asked you this offline.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's gonna be a
So I
whole part
use
of it
the
as well.
Butterworth
Butterworth,
mainly.
baby. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah, that's the way to go.
it's changed my entire perception of the possibilities of, I mean, that's, yeah, it just looks so much better. It's unbelievable what a difference it makes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really handy. And you know, I used to work in Maya LT before Indie came out,
Mm-hmm.
and Maya LT doesn't have Butterworth or Gaussian like filters. So I had to like manually remove keys and tweak the whole animation by
Oh,
hand, and
yeah.
that was awful.
Yeah. I love that Maya
So
Indie exists and it's like
yeah,
affordable
yeah.
now. It's not $2,500. Hello, official Vargas. Go Loacher. That's right.
Hey. So now that we have baked it, we see that we have a lot of Euler flips in the
Mm-hmm.
animation data. So the next step that I do is select the zero frame and just completely null it out back to the rest position, because like this is the default position that they can take, and I want the rest of the animation curves to be relative to this. So I don't want to like relativize it based on the like the custom position that I have set up for the motion capture transfer. I want it to be relative to the base rig, because sometimes when I use the
Hmm.
already, you have a value on like all the bones and stuff like that, all rotation, translation, all that. What happens is when it could use like smaller angles, it won't, and sometimes it will still give you like a weirdly corrected value at the end. So you have like 360 degrees added to certain values, and it doesn't make sense to do that.
Oh, and that's
So
because of the first keyframe that's
yeah,
in
yeah.
a interesting. Huh.
So I found that if I set that to 0 and set it back to the default that I have on this rig, it's gonna give me a much better result and much more consistent than if I just use the default like baked T pose.
Right.
So now I
Because I
click
assume
Euler.
because all these filters are doing averages and means, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
You have that one keyframe in there that's jacking everything up. Interesting.
yeah. So now we have the sort of final curves that we got from the motion capture data. I mean
And I
semi-final.
love it
But
when
now we
it when
can
you can see when you click in and you see all the nice you get like the nice little like Bezier lines on the curves or whatever. Yeah, it kind of
yeah,
snaps
yeah.
into these. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, that. Yeah,
So
yeah.
now the next step is I usually just delete the first key, because I want the first key to be like the first actual motion.
Hmm.
But to make this work, I think I'm gonna like delete like up like this point when you actually
Okay.
start walking around. So let's just do this.
And then
And
will you yeah, cool.
yeah, okay. So that's like our end position. I'm gonna delete these as well. And my first key is on 180. So I'm gonna go here and type in a little equation that will pretty much what I typed in here is equal minus 180.
Move every
And what,
keyframe back.
yeah, yeah, moves every keyframe back relative to what they got. So now, if it doesn't crash,
Oh, I'm sure it would love to crash.
what are you doing, Maya? Or is it minus
Oh, do you
equals
have to put in
180?
something about the
Yeah, yeah,
frame? Oh,
minus
that's
equals 180, sorry.
oh, minus
So
equals, yeah.
it's the
Huh.
mathematical thing that you want to do, then equals then the number that you want to do. Sorry.
Minus equals the minus amount equals yeah
Yeah,
180 of
yeah,
course
yeah.
yeah little
So sort of like that. So now what I will do is I know that 739 is my last keyframe, so I'm just gonna set this to 739. So now we have the entire animation, just anything that I have animated is sort of confined to my workspace. And now come the filters.
yeah.
So usually what I do is when I use my filters, I do the knees and feet on a separate pass compared to like the rest of the rig, because I can smooth the rest of the rig a bit more than the feet, because
Right.
if I smooth the feet a bit too much, then what I get is they won't like make contact hard, like in a hard fashion with the ground.
Mm,
They will be very smooth because you smooth it out too much because it's trying to, average the values out.
right. Yeah. It's like when I usually don't do the fingers as much because I find I lose if you Butterworth fingers too much, then I like completely. I'll have done this in the animation, but it just is like because
Yeah, yeah,
it's smoothing out what it perceives as very dramatic, right? Movement, but on a finger, it's appropriate.
yeah. So what I found is the default value of 7 works for feet in
That was going to
most
be my big
situations.
question. Okay, okay. So for feet, okay,
Yeah, yeah, for feet. The default value of 7 works because it keeps that snappiness, but also removes a lot of the jitter from it.
yeah.
But for the rest of it, and
Oh,
I
I'm so
think what I'm
excited. Can I
gonna
guess
do,
what number you use for the rest?
yeah, yeah,
I am going to guess you use a 4, but I hope it's a 3.
no, it's a 5.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's a very. I'm sure that that is not funny to anyone, but
Okay,
it's.
there we go.
The more so the lower the number is on your Butterworth filter, the more smoothing it's going to do, and then at a certain point, I mean that's why I don't do it on fingers because I do it on a 3 on fingers, and they're like I don't move at all. Yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah,
you do a
yeah,
5. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Usually I don't go under 5 unless the animation needs to be like really stationary and it's like
Right.
really smooth. So
Right.
when we are doing like the guard animations that you've
Mm-hmm.
created, like when we have that's like one dude looking around, not really doing anything much. We can go like 4
4. Yeah.
or
Right.
even 3.5 if we really
Yeah.
want to make it really smooth,
Yeah, and then he'll
because
have very
we're not doing anything crazy. You don't need like snappy motions there. But if you want to keep a bit of snappiness in your movements, I don't usually go under 5.
yeah. And for anyone who's wondering what we're talking about, basically, in most of the programs, there's some sort of smoothing filter you can apply. In Maya, it's called Butterworth. In Blender, there's a way that you can do it, and it's just using it's like a Bezier smooth. It's O is the hotkey. I don't know what it does in Blender, but you can do it in Blender. You can do it in Unreal. Apparently, someone was talking on the Discord about it. So it's something I didn't used to smooth my mocap, and I was like, it's fine. I don't know. And then I started doing it, and you just get so much closer to like a. It just looks like not hand animated because you're still it's very human, but like it's so smooth. It looks so pro. I don't know. It's so worth doing. Use smoothing filters on your
Yeah,
retargeted mocap. Yeah, it's great.
but
Anyway,
use it smart. Use it
but
smart.
use it smart.
Don't
Don't go to
overdo it.
3. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Don't go to 3. 3 is a bad number. We don't talk about 3.
we don't talk about 3. The allure of 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you see that our mocap is like pretty smooth, but we have some issues with like the feet because we are using the toes and the toes sort of twist around when you know you're moving around and on the skeleton like in Rokoko Studio as well, because they
Yeah.
are trying to adapt to the ground. So the next step is to clean up the feet. But for now, before we do that, I'm gonna show you what I do for the
Oh, on the
necks.
neck. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please. Yeah, this is interesting.
Because so what I do is I take both of these and I key the like the rotation only,
These are
and I go to
these are
this
the
one.
top 2 neck joints that aren't being
Yeah, yeah,
affected by the one neck joint from Rokoko, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Because we only have like the base neck that has like you see the animation curves.
right.
So what I do here is select the whole thing, and okay, now I'm gonna select it again. There we go. So I have it selected, and I find that it sometimes doesn't work when I don't have the rotate X, Y, and Z like options selected on the left, like in
Selected.
the list. Sometimes if I don't select them, it sort of works weird. So usually I try to remember to select those, and then I go to the second neck joint and paste it. And now if I normalize it, I have the same curve as the bottom neck. And if I go to the last one and paste it, now we have the same data transferred to all three. But having the same data 3 times in a row, that's like a multiplication of 3. It's gonna look
Right.
weird because it's not what the source was. So what I do is select all 3 of these neck controllers, select the whole thing, and divide equals 3. So now I divide the values by 3, so
So
the
the
animation is
amount, right.
propagated properly.
Right. So the amount is kind of the same, but you're getting more movement because each bone is moving. So it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of adding
So
up. Right. Yeah.
yeah. So what we had on the base neck joint is divided, like split between the 3
Yeah.
joints.
Right.
And what this gives me is the neck will now, if we can find a spot where you look to your either direction, you see how the
I mean,
neck bends.
even that, you're getting a much more, yeah, it's like propagating along the neck chain.
Yeah, yeah,
You can see it's just wiggling a little. It's like very eel-like kind of.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I didn't really sell that movement, but I
No,
feel
it's
like I
okay.
can, yeah, see it.
Like when you're looking to your right here, you can see it. Like it's gradually
Right,
twisting.
right. It's curving on all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how I transfer the mocap data. Now we have a sort of a smoother result, but it's still not a final result. What we need to do right now is I usually add a plane for reference.
Yep. Gotta add that
And
plane because I bet he's above it.
the iconic plane.
The iconic plane.
So,
Oh, wow. Okay,
and
yeah.
here's like the sort of something that I haven't seen before, but I'm sure a lot of people do it. I just haven't encountered this information
I
and
don't
found
think
it
a
on
lot of
my
people
own.
do it. I think, is this the override plane
Yeah,
idea?
yeah, yeah.
I don't think a lot of people do. I think that there's like there's like 20 people who know. There's nobody knows all the features of Maya. It's like
Yeah, but
amazing, you know?
layers themselves. Layers themselves are like if you go and study animation, you study layers pretty much a lot of the
Right.
time.
Animation layers.
But what I'm talking about is the specific workflow for cleaning up the keyframes for the feed, which is sort of using a hybrid approach with
Right.
the override layers. So I have this base position, and what I'm gonna do for this foot is just create keyframes throughout the timeline for when I have like a stable foot plant. And then I'm gonna correct those in post. But for now, the weight of the override layer is at 0. So what this means, it's not influencing anything, but if I create a keyframe, it's gonna create the keyframe from the position that it currently has in the world. So
Right.
if I just set it
So
to
to create
1,
that override layer, you just selected your controller and
yeah,
then went to layer, add selected to
and
override layer,
create override layer from selected, yeah.
create
And then
overrides.
then I
Okay.
just yeah, and then I just set the weight to 0 because I don't
And
want
then
it
you
to
set the weight
affect.
to 0 because if you set the weight to 100 right now, they wouldn't move, right? Or something.
Yeah, 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 because it would hold the position that you had when you created the layer, because that's what it samples first.
Okay, that's where because I was trying this after you told me about this workflow. I was trying this and I was like, I had it on 100 or on 1, and I was like, this
Yeah.
doesn't seem right. Okay, okay, cool, interesting.
So you need to set it to 0 first. Sorry if I didn't say that
No, no,
before,
no,
but
that totally makes sense. Yeah, so you set it to 0. Okay,
yeah. And now if you keyframe within the override layer, what it's gonna do is, okay, so this is the position I currently have in the world. I'm just gonna take that.
right.
So I'm gonna keyframe throughout the
And are you
timeline.
keying? You're not keying the beginning and ending. You're just when it lands.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I only want to affect like when it's on the ground. I don't want to affect anything else just yet.
Okay.
So there. I also see that we have sort of a.
A little.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. We can correct for that in post. There we go. And okay, so that's our last stationary position. So here's the fun part, and well, fun is relative in this instance because it's still work. But what I do is offset these keyframes to an in-between position between like the two steps. So this is where it's planted. This is when it's in the air in between the two positions, and I drag it there. And I'm gonna explain why I'm doing that when I start to bring in like the weights for the animation. But yeah, so this is like an in-between position. Let's keep it there.
Right. 10 frames, 7 frames before it lands, kind of.
It's sort of like in the middle, like
In the middle. Okay, so fully
yeah,
in the
yeah. So
middle.
it's not like how many frames. It's more like, okay, so it's traveling from this point to this point. So this is the midpoint. That's where I want my keyframe.
And
I'm
you
gonna tell you
also
why in just a bit.
okay. And
Yep.
you did something to the keyframes too.
Yeah,
You stepped them or whatever.
yeah.
Instead
Because
of
I
a
need
linear.
instant changes.
Yeah.
So, but you'll see why I'm doing that just in a small second.
You're like, stop asking questions. I'm going to get to it.
No. It's okay. It's okay. But if I start explaining Lao, it's gonna be a bit more difficult to understand when you see it happen.
Right. This is
So
this is awesome. It's like this is such a I'm gonna have to retitle this video to like pro cleanup workflow or something because it's we don't often get into the nitty gritty of really high level cleaning, but it's really important to see. It's interesting.
yeah. So now I have it set up to my in-between positions and it's stepped. So if I turn the weight up, what you'll see is we have these instant changes happening. And
Can you play that for I
yeah,
just want to see that in
yeah. So because now it's just, instantly changing from this position to the next one. So that's what, the stepped interpolation does. But of
so
course, it's not going to look
interesting.
like this in the end.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. I'm understanding more how the override layer is working. Yeah. Okay.
So what I do now is I have my keyframes and I'm correcting them on this layer. So now the weight is up on the layer, and
Do
I'm
you
just
have an auto
correcting them.
key? You have auto key on turned on, so it's just
Yeah,
picking
yeah,
up
yeah,
all these. Yeah.
yeah. But these are already existing keyframes, so I think they will alter anyway. But yeah, it's safe. It's a safe practice to have auto key on when you're working. This makes things a lot easier. So I'm gonna do a quick job. And we can always adjust these like after the
Right.
fact.
You're like, oh, it's I need to turn it more or whatever, and
Yeah. So if I want to check, like, okay, so that's where my foot
right.
will be,
And
so I
then
can just,
make
yeah.
sure it kind of matches.
So for this one, it's gonna be right there. But what's the final position looking like? That okay? So direction is good. I just need to like flatten it properly.
Right.
There. Okay. This one will be somewhere around here. So.
Oh wow.
So for now, the weight is not keyed. I just want to,
Right.
switch back and forth. The next
Right.
step will be keying the weight of the override layer.
So okay, yeah, I get it. That's so smart. So you're, I mean, yeah, we'll get there. I'll shut up. I think I
No,
understand
it's
how
okay.
this
It's okay.
works.
You
This
can.
makes sense. Yeah, you're keying into those positions when the foot gets close, and then it
Yeah.
naturally right.
So yeah, that looks right. And the last position is that. So let's just do it something like that. Okay, so now that we have that, we take it back to 0.
Right.
And now what we do is, this is when the foot starts moving. So we're gonna set a keyframe here.
That should be 0, right? Because the foot.
Yeah, that should
Yeah,
be
right.
0.
That should be 0 because we want the natural movement of the foot without the override
In
layer.
between.
In
In
between.
between.
Right.
And at like this point is we set another keyframe, because what this is going to look like, I'm gonna show it on this one footstep. We're gonna set another one here, and when we plant is when we want the 1 value.
Right.
So now if we set it to like 1, and now if we set it here to 1, what's happening is it's holding the position, but when we start lifting the leg, we go back to the default, and we
Right.
switch in a stepped motion to the next position, and that's why we have
Right.
it in between the two legs when we, like the two foot plants, when we switch the position, because that's when the influence is 0. So we just snap to the next one under the hood, and then we fade it back in. And now we have a
So
correct
what would happen if you didn't move the keyframe to the middle and it was just where it landed still? It wouldn't the data wouldn't be there
Well,
early enough?
it could work, but I've, from my experience, this sort of works better, but it's up to you. So if you want to just keep the end positions and then do a stepped transition between that, that can work as well. But if you do it so like you don't move it to an in-between position and you keep it at the planned time, then you need to copy that keyframe to when you want to lift it, because otherwise it's going to start to transition to the next one, or you're going to have some weird behavior when it starts to snap.
Right,
You know?
that's gonna you're gonna get something bizarre happening on the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
snapping. It's like gonna really quickly jump in
Yeah,
when
yeah,
one
yeah.
of the keyframe gets engaged. Yeah.
I can actually just show you with this one. So I'm gonna set this back to 0 because I want to show you. So this is when we lift it, and this is when we plant it. So 108. I'm gonna remember 96. So if I just
96.
leave it as it was, and let's remove these as well. So if I leave it as it was and I don't change it to stepped and I don't change it to like anything, I just have it on the default automatic tangent, what's happening is under the hood, this is gonna start sliding. So how do we fix that? Well, we're gonna need to create a new keyframe just when we start to lift the
Right.
leg. So now we're working with another keyframe. So if I want to edit the position of the foot, because I realize that, okay, this is not the correct foot plant position, I need to get a new one, I need to edit 2 keyframes now.
Right. And it
Instead
gets
of
very
just
messy.
the one. Just the
Yeah.
one in between position, when it's in between the 2 legs.
Right. Yeah.
Like
that
the
makes
2
sense.
foot plants. So it's sort of like a more effective approach to have it stepped and in between foot plants.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, totally. It totally makes sense. It's just such a again, what a I can't it. This is something that at least for me would be a very hard fought through. Like I don't know how you figure that out the first time.
It just clicked to
You're
me
just
like,
playing
okay,
around.
why
Yeah.
don't we try this? And
Right. Yeah.
like at attempt number 125, I ended up with this workflow.
And you're like, oh, it works.
Yeah, and then I realized, why didn't I do that from the start? This is so much easier.
Because it's not obvious. It's
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
and there's no. It's hard to find tutorials that deal with this. Like they exist, but they're usually not very, I don't know, easy to parse.
Yeah. Sometimes these are hard to follow. When I'm trying to learn something, I sometimes run into like that issue that
Yeah.
someone's making like information on it available, which is really nice, but the way it's formatted is actually like throwing me for a loop, and I have to like figure out like, okay, so what do they mean exactly?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so now that's the middle position. Now we key there. That's the plant position, and we have 5 more. That's gonna be a breeze.
And so you're not adding. Will you go back and do the one?
It's actually there's another reason why it's great to structure your weighting like the weight of the override layer like this. because then I can just select these two and set the weight to 1.
Oh, oh,
So
interesting.
when it's planted, it's there, you know.
Right. So you,
Because I
but
know that the
you'll do that at the end, and you'll select the
yeah,
pairs.
because now I need to see how it's
Mm.
like how the whole thing looks pretty much.
Hmm. So
There we go.
echelon, echelon. It is interesting, isn't it? Um, yeah, it's interesting to see how the sausage is made. Yeah, I think the unfortunate reality is that most mocap the way that it is now, like I think we do a really good job of making it as easy as possible to get a pretty good result, but you need to go in and you need to play with stuff and you need to do editing, which is I think is true of really any mocap system. It eventually maybe AI will make it so that it's all perfect from video or something. You capture a source and it's like I know exactly where each bone was, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So it's like until we have a really like robust AI that will help us out, it's gonna be sort of like this. Like you have to go in and do the cleanup manually.
Yeah. And especially if you have a stylized character, for example,
Oh
where
yeah, absolutely.
you've got atypical body proportions, it's like, yeah, I do think at some point there'll be like really good video based mocap. Like we already see it. I see it sometimes on Reddit or something like a really crazy video interpolated, thing, but it just doesn't work for most situations.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay, so I finish it up, and sometimes what I like to do is keep the value on not on 1, but on 0.9, because when you're walking around, your foot actually, like does a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
shifting so it's not like you have like this solid object on your foot.
Right.
That's like, that
That's
your foot is not a solid object. It squishes around, it balances you
right.
out. That's
So a
how the whole
little bit
thing
of
works.
movement and
Yeah, a
yeah,
little bit of the original data is retained, and we have a
that's
bit of
interesting.
that
Do
wiggling.
do you do that with guns too?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more for feet, like more for feet
Yeah.
and things that make contact.
Yeah,
So
you're
now if we play
shifting
it
weight
back,
and stuff, yeah.
yeah. So now if we play it back, this is our result. So we have one foot that's not yet put through this process and one
Wow.
that is.
Wow. That's such a cool way to look at it with one foot that is and one that isn't because it's such a massive difference. I want to clip that and like just put that because that's such a I was going to say like man, I wish that we could have like set up a camera and done a before and after. But this gets that point across, I think, really well.
Yeah. And now that you have this, you can actually just go in with another layer, an additive layer, that doesn't affect like the data under it, but adds to it.
And then if
Because
and then yeah,
now we see that sometimes we have clipping
right.
here,
That's what I was
like
about to
into the
say.
ground.
Yeah, can you just add another layer to fix that? Because it's not worth it to
Yeah.
go in
So
and
okay, that's where the plant's
yep,
happening. This is where the
yep,
clipping is. Let's flip
yep,
it up.
yep,
Boom.
yep,
That's it.
yeah,
And you can just work from this onward and onward, adding separate layers. And the workflow I found most useful, and I think this is probably how most people do it who work with layers. You try to work with layers as much as possible. So you try not to touch the underlying data
right,
as much as possible. So you want to keep your edits in the layers because then it's really easy to go back and adjust.
right. It's
So if I were
non-destructive,
to bake
right?
this down and realize, oh, I messed something up, then I have to like revert back to a previous save, yada yada yada, or redo
Right.
the whole thing because maybe I didn't save separate versions of it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as far as you can go, use layers.
Yeah,
And that way your base data remains more or less untouched.
Yeah.
So
And worst case scenario, let's say you're going back and you're redoing the elevation of the foot at the very end, let something goes wrong and you end up with a corrupt layer, you just delete that layer and you
yeah,
just restart. And then or you have a couple layers, you don't have to restart the whole thing because you just like, okay, somehow I messed up this layer. Let's just delete it and restart from the safety of the other layers still being there and yeah, which I do
exactly.
sometimes. I'm like, if there's a keyframe in here somewhere I can't find, or I don't know what I did, and so I'll just delete the layer. And because I've got a bunch of layers, it won't really matter.
Yeah, and also
Um,
it makes troubleshooting really easy. So if something
right.
breaks, you
Yeah.
can just mute your layers and just check what's going, like which one is the one that's screwing you over.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, so this is awesome. I don't want to. It's already been a little bit. I'm really curious to look at how you handle rifle holding, and then I would love to go through what you do to bring things into Unreal. And I don't think we'll have enough time to set up a whole a whole scene or anything, but like just I would
Uh,
love to see the rifle holding workflow.
okay.
I think that's something that people would be super curious about.
Okay. I'm just gonna, we're not gonna keep this. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna save it. Let me just stop sharing my screen for a sec because I have some files here that I don't yet
Yeah.
want to show. You'll find out when you find out. But yeah, I'm just gonna save this for now, and I'm gonna send it over to you if you want to just experiment on it.
Yeah, I
And
would
if you
love
want,
to. Yeah.
like, if you want just to try it out, see where the workflow goes, because now you have a reference in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I understand just seeing you do I understand more about it's the you go through and you key it all with it off and then you're keying it on once you have all the positions locked and I think I'll definitely be able to figure it out from there.
Yeah. Okay, so let
Yeah.
me share my screen again. There we go.
You
So,
monk, happy that you're having a good experience with it. Yeah, that's I believe the same thing. Gets you 80% of the way there, 90% if you're lucky, and then the rest of it's cleanup. And
yeah, yeah, exactly.
still is I can't hand animate it. So thank you, Echelon. I like my beanie too. Red beanies all day. Okay. Stormtroopers. Or
Actually,
Master Chief.
I don't Master Chief, because I don't have
Yeah.
a Stormtrooper rig set up right now
Yeah, yeah.
because Maya LT files aren't compatible with like the
With
full Maya,
Indie.
so now I'm having
Yeah.
to remake my rigs. So I
Oh,
don't have the Star
painful.
Wars rig yet.
Right. You're in Halo world right now, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've been working on Halo, so that's what I have right now. But what I'm gonna do is bring in a quick animation that
Oh, I
will.
didn't send you the Stormtrooper animation. Hold on. Or you
Oh,
just
it's
use one of
fine.
yours. Just use one of
Yeah,
yours. Yeah,
yeah.
right.
I'm gonna bring one from a project I released in March. It's called Endure. It's a Halo animation. And which one is it? Which one is it? Which
Is
one is
that the
it?
one where it's like Master Chief running around and destroying that depot, and then it ends
It's like in
in
a city. It's like a destroyed city,
yeah, yeah,
and he
yeah,
takes down
yeah,
the Banshee and stuff
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Man, some of you're the shots in that I remember like detail shots of the helmet. Just hard surface can look so good in Unreal. It just looks like
Yeah.
almost photo real at some points. It's like crazy.
So
Oh shit.
here's this is a good model because oh yeah, Ashlon did the music for that.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
you know he has,
Props.
and the way he's like he has seen like behind the scenes stuff, of course, because he was working on the
Right.
project with me.
Right.
But I don't think many people have seen like this exact workflow yet. Like I've explained it to a couple people like privately, but this is the first public appearance of the
Yeah.
workflow.
It's really interesting to see. Um,
So an interesting thing about this model is that I can't really move the shoulders that much because we have this heavy frame on the character and
mm,
it blocks the shoulder movement, and if I start moving it, it's gonna clip.
right.
So something I do for this is bake the shoulders separately and then just downscale the effect of the animation curve on them and then bake the rest.
Huh.
And the reason I'm doing this and the reason I'm not altering the motion after the fact is because right now I have the rest of the arm constrained to the motion capture data. if I were to bake it and then I edit the rotational values of the shoulder, it's going to offset the whole arm.
Right.
But if I keep the constraints, and you'll see it here, if I edit it right now, the arms will stay the same because they are getting the constraint data coming in and it's overriding their rotation. So I
So
can
does that
edit the
mean the
shoulder
arms
freely.
are IK? Are the arms IK then?
No, they are FK, but they are getting an orientation data. They are getting the rotation data from the rig. So,
Okay.
or like the animation skeleton, like the motion capture skeleton. So what you can see here is if I move the shoulder, it's still gonna keep the same data as in the motion capture because I haven't yet baked it. So I'm free to edit and downscale the animation of the shoulder without affecting anything else.
Huh.
So that's why it's a two-step process. And I actually realized that I haven't baked to the correct frame rate. Let me set it to 30. Keep. Yeah, there we go. So now that we have it baked, I just, same thing, zero it out, have the Euler filter run through it, and then I'm just dividing it by like 4.
So
Because
just so you still have a small amount of shoulder movement, but across the board it's a fourth as much. So just because he's got the
Yeah.
frame on it prevent, but you still have a little movement because if it's static, it'll feel
Yeah, it's
not
gonna feel
good.
like cheap.
Yeah,
It's
like
gonna feel
light.
unrefined.
Yeah, yeah. You're
That
like,
data pretty much.
yeah, right.
But right now we have that small movement, but it's not gonna clip with the rest of the armor, so
Oh,
we have
wow.
that little bit of a leeway.
Yeah, that's such a
I
clever way
think
of
what I'm
dealing
gonna
with that.
do I think what I'm gonna do is just focus on the arm. So I'm not gonna bake anything else for now. I'm just gonna show you like how I do like arm attachment because that's the main thing that we're looking at right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just gonna bake the arms and I'm gonna leave the rest, follow the constraints because that's not.
So again, so where maybe so we had the mocap that you brought in and
Yeah,
and you've baked some of the mocap to the shoulders and now you've
yeah.
baked the rest of it to the arm constraints which are all FK
To the arm controls, yeah.
to the arm
So
controls,
it's the
right, which are
constraints. It's
FK
the constraints that are driving the controls.
and it's just the orientation data.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So it's just
Exactly.
retargeting it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now zero out the first frame. So this is the default pose, by the way, for the arms. And now I'm gonna Euler filter it. And for the sake of it, I'm gonna bake the fingers there because they are set up to follow like the input from the smart suit, like from the mocap data. So I'm just gonna bake these real quick. Otherwise, we're gonna get to see some weird results when we move the arms around. Okay, so now I can just.
And that's a straight up bone to bone baking
Yeah.
as opposed to control rig, right? It's just
Yeah, because I find it easier to see the finger controls as bones.
Yeah,
And
it's always really hard to play with them. They don't like moving if you use an IK rig or whatever.
yeah. So now we have that, and we have run the Euler filter on it. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're good. So, how do I go about doing the arms? So I have this, which of course isn't right. It was right when I did it, but different character, the mocap is gonna look a bit weird. So what I do here is make an additive layer for the right arm, which holds the rifle, and just set it to the correct position, which would be something like this.
FK. Yep. Okay.
I'm not gonna go through like smoothing it out because I don't have the rest of the rig
No.
baked.
Right. That's that, and I'm not. You already covered all that kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I have this, which is sort of like the correct position that I want, but the left arm isn't correct. So what
and it has baked data on it.
Yeah. The left arm is baked, but it's of course it's not going to be correct, because it's not using a constraint yet. So what I do right now is switch to my IK chain because it's been on the FK chain. So I switch to the IK and I bake that as well. But for this case, I'm just gonna bake the hand, so we don't have to deal with the elbow yet. So now I have the IK hand baked as well. So I have all the keyframe data. So what I'm gonna do now is move my hand into the correct position on this keyframe because in this like time frame, it's gonna be on the rifle. So it doesn't matter if I edit a keyframe here,
Okay.
because this is gonna be constrained anyway. So it's not gonna be visible, like it's not gonna be visible that one keyframe just jumps like this, because this is gonna be constrained to this position anyway. So this is where I edit my base data just a bit.
Oh,
But
so okay, you're editing the base data. Okay, interesting.
yeah, but just for this one keyframe, I can always just delete this one keyframe if I
Could
want to
you
go
do
back.
this on an additive instead?
I could actually, but for the sake of it, I like to keep it on the base data because I don't know, I just find it more convenient because for this
Interesting.
one keyframe, I'm not gonna create a new layer and just buff out the whole list.
Yeah.
So next up, I create an empty layer which has nothing in it. I don't want
Okay.
anything on that yet.
Okay. Right. This is interesting. Okay. Right.
So now I select the control of the weapon, or I can just select the control of the hand. Anything goes, but I usually just go for the weapon because sometimes, if I want to switch to an IK control here, if I select the FK control, that's going to give me some problems. So it's safe to select the weapon at this point because that's constrained to the bone of the arm, not the
Right.
control itself. So I selected the grip control, and now I'm gonna shift select the hand control on the left hand. So now
Second
I
thing you
have
select is what gets parented, right?
yeah.
Usually.
So
Yeah.
the second, it's always like influencer and influencee.
Right.
So like
I
this is
often
like
mess
the
that
first
up.
thing you select. The first thing you select is the one that's gonna affect the second one.
Right.
It sometimes changes around because Maya likes to be inconsistent in some regards, but for
Huh.
constraints, this is how it works.
Right.
So now I double click on the parent constraint, and you can see that I can actually select an animation layer to use. So I select animation layer 2. I have this option selected to set the layer to override. So what's this gonna do is change my empty additive layer into an override layer, but it's only gonna contain this constraint. So it's not gonna contain the hand, it's not gonna contain anything else, just this constraint itself. So now if I click apply and start to play the animation, the hand is now on the gun.
The constraint that you selected though, that's the IK constraint for the
Yeah, that's
hand, right?
the
Yeah.
IK control of the hand. But it's not in this layer. In this layer only contains like the constraints. So you can see in the shapes window, I
Oh,
only have
okay. And
the
so
constraint.
the controller is not in that layer.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we create an empty layer, because we don't want the controller to be part of that. It's only just the constraint.
Huh. Okay, that I think that's where I was going wrong trying to do
Yeah.
that. That's so interesting because oh, right, because I was putting the controller into the layer, which was an override on the controller, which was getting very
Yeah.
because the controller was then not moving.
Yeah.
But this is just the constraint of the
Yeah.
controller. It's
Yeah.
so difficult to figure out on your own. I'm so happy that I'm learning from you.
So now if I set it back to 0 and I look at my animation, I actually have so Chief reaches around and grabs a grenade from his back and throws it into a group of elites. So I can see that this is the point when he like lets go of the gun. So I can just keyframe this and go a couple frames, keyframe again, and if I select the layer again, you see that I have 2 keyframes for like the weight of the layer. If I set the first one to 1, anything before this keyframe, the
Right.
hand will be attached to the gun. But as soon as it gets zeroed out, we're back to the regular animation.
That's
And
so
now I can just,
great.
this is like the time when I select the gun again.
Do it.
Yeah, I've had like some magnetic interference here because I went too close to the garage door, so that's why the hand is like sort of freaking out. But yeah, so here we go. And if I turn this into a 1, yeah, we have that bit of a flip
Yeah,
because the
right. Yeah,
mocap
you
data
just
was a
delete.
bit scuffed. But you get the idea.
It's so
So
interesting. I
let's
never.
go.
Yeah, it's so great.
Go.
This is
Go back, and now it's attached to the gun. And it's
and
gonna stay
so
attached for the rest of it.
the fact that like you said that you were attaching to the grip part. So will you make like there's a controller, there's a rig on the gun, which is really just
Yeah.
null objects positioned at different points. So you have like two
Yeah,
nulls, one
exactly.
for the trigger and one for the handheld, right? And they're just
Yeah.
under
Like
the
there's
gun.
one for like there's like a global controller for the gun. That's the grip. Then there's one for like the charging handle, and then there's one for the magazine. So it's like 3 controllers pretty much on the gun because I have a scene where I take out the magazine from the gun and I put in a new one.
Right.
So
And you
that's why
want
I
it to
needed a
snap right
control
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I needed that. But if I go like right
Oh,
here, and
okay,
I
yeah.
also like chief reloads properly. So here's the bolt, and then I can move
Oh,
this,
dope. Well, that's awesome. Yeah.
and if I select this one, no, that's root. Yeah, that's the magazine. There we go.
Right.
So if
And
I've
that
selected the magazine, but it's sort of inside Chief's arm, so that's not going to be too helpful. But I can take out the magazine as well.
oh, that's so cool. I mean, that's just fun. And then the grip, the main controller for the gun is just parented to the right hand of
Yeah,
your model, right?
actually, a trick I use for these things, I'm gonna open up the rig itself without like any weapons or motion capture data or anything like that. So I'm gonna move the hand, like the IK hand, to a different position. There we go. So we have this. And if I switch to the FK chain, it's gonna transition over. But I only want one set of controllers for the fingers. So I don't want to have like a set of controllers for the fingers for the IK chain and for the FK chain. So what's the solution to that? Well, if I can just go deep into this hierarchy right here. No, sorry, that's the hips, spine. And there we go. So this is the structure of the arm. So I have the IK-FK switch, like the slider, and the same as I've shown with the legs, I have an FK bone chain, an IK bone chain, and a main bone chain that gets influenced by these things.
Right.
So the end of this bone chain, the rig hand, which is always parented to either chain, either the IK or the FK, this actually influences the finger controls. So the left finger group is parented to this bone with a constraint. So if I change the, let me visualize it real quick, if I can. Yeah, there we go. So this is the main bone chain that I'm using. So if I change the IK or the FK setting, the end bone of this chain controls the fingers, so I don't need to create separate finger controls
Right.
because they will travel between the separate, like,
Right.
rig setup.
Yeah, all they care about is where the wrist controller is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
wrist
yeah.
controller on the main bone chain
Uh,
is what influences the fingers.
which is
And
shared
since the fingers will
between.
always be, hopefully, we're not talking about severe dismemberment,
Yeah.
so hopefully the fingers will be on the end of the bone chain. They can just follow this point.
Right. That's smart too.
And
Yeah.
I just saved myself a separate set of controllers.
Yeah, right. And especially on something like fingers, which is the ear
Yeah.
of the, yeah, right. It's so many friggin' bones. Um, yeah. Man, that is super fascinating. Yeah, it's super. I'm so excited to go try out the override rig uh, thing again. Can we just quickly go into Unreal and show just how you do the import? I think, and again, I think it's really valuable to point out that that a lot of people they want to stay in Unreal. They're working in Unreal and they're like, I want to just use Unreal for everything.
Yeah.
But I always recommend either Blender or Maya as a prep zone for Unreal because it just isn't. I mean, I think there are people who can do this sort of thing in Unreal, but it seems difficult to do, and it's just not quite set up for I don't know, animation like this. So I think it's valuable for people to see that you are once you go to Unreal, you're basically just doing environment building, lighting,
Yeah.
camera movement, maybe texturing, but all the animation is you're using Maya to do it. And at that point the thing is perfect and then you go to Unreal for finishing essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me find an animation from this project.
If you have
Yeah, yeah, I'm,
multiple
I'm just gonna show the same one that
yeah,
I've started cleaning up right here. So
yeah,
how
that'd
it
be
looks
great.
like when I import it to Unreal.
If you have a fight,
So,
if you have an elite punching Master Chief in the face, do you do all of that timing in Maya?
no, sometimes what I do, like sometimes I mesh two animations together, like I bring two rigs together with their animation already baked in and cleaned up, and then I adjust them to work. But in some occasions, I can just get away with retiming it in
Yeah,
Unreal and just
you
doing a
just
bit of shifting like that.
yeah you
But
they're
for
just
instance,
punching. You're right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But for instance, when I had to kick a gun out of my own hand in like a Star Wars video, so I have like an Old Republic video called Crossfire, and
Mm-hmm.
in that there's a character that kicks the gun from another trooper's hand and then shoots him in the chest. It's like a
Right.
pretty gnarly takedown if you talk about it like this. But for that, I had to go in Maya, bring in the two animations, like, on their own rigs, and then set them up so that they actually make contact and it's timed
Yeah.
right.
Right. Okay.
So let me share my screen. Uh, so, okay, so this is my Unreal project that I'm using right now.
Unreal
So this is
5.
the, yeah, Unreal 5 all the way. So the way this works is I've exported out the final skeleton with the baked animation and all that. I have everything finalized. So after that, it's pretty much just a drag and drop into Unreal, where I search for the Mark 6 armor skeleton that I've created. So this is the skeleton for the Master Chief. And I don't really edit anything here. It's just a straight up import.
Oh,
And now I'm gonna import this one animation. And if I select the Master Chief and give it to him, and I start simulating in the editor.
oh, interesting. So you're not bringing in the full asset. You're bringing in the animation, and because you've
Just
got
the
character,
animation itself. The character
yeah,
is like a separate model.
right, right. And so, for example, I imagine maybe you have the stormtroopers and you have some physics armor set up. If you were to bring in a baked FBX from Maya, you would have to reset up the physics sim every time. But instead, you have a model that's already set up in Unreal. You import the animation, which is on the same exact skeleton, and it matches up
Yeah.
perfectly. And then the physics are already built, and you just hit play.
Yeah, yeah. So what's happening for
Hmm.
that, for physics simulations, when I do like my gear simulations, what's happening is I use the thing called animation blueprints in Unreal, where you can have like nodes added in,
Right.
and you can do pretty awesome stuff with them. And in there, there's a rigid body node. And if you create a physics asset and you set it to a simulated state, so it's always simulated, and you put it in this rigid body node, the physics bodies that you have set up in that asset are going to simulate when you play back the animation. So it's
Right.
always going to be a dynamic thing, and that's layered on top of your existing animation.
Right. Which just adds so much to, yeah, you have
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
cape, you have your whatever, what's her name?
Yeah. And
The
for like
stormtrooper.
capes you can use cloths, like the cloth tools in
Right.
Unreal. And but yeah, for like stormtroopers, when you have like the shoulder pads, the chest piece, and all that, and that just wobbles around, it sells that plastic armor feeling, that is known from the movies.
Totally. Yeah. It just looks so much more realistic. Those little tiny touches just make things, the little wobbles, because they're all procedurally done. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it's physics, so it looks natural.
Right. And then you can add weird debris crashing against them, and maybe the armor moves a little bit or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so with something like this, you just would bring in the gun and position it so
Yeah,
that the
the
hands are in
gun
the
the gun is
right.
like a separate skeletal
Yeah.
mesh in Unreal. So it's like has its own skeleton and stuff like that. So when I export this particular animation from Maya, I have a gun animation, I have a character animation, and he also throws a grenade, so I have a grenade animation as well. So
Right.
that's what makes up a shot like this for this character particularly.
How much of your time is split Maya to Unreal, you think? And like you're making a big video, uh, are you like where is all the most of the care is like the you're spending a lot of time in Maya. Is it
Yeah.
like but it's all is it this is so it's interesting because it's like I coming into this I was like god you do so much work in Unreal I'm sure but because it's all set up perfectly in Maya it's like you just throw it in and now you just throw in a bunch of rocks and I mean I don't know it seems like this is a little bit not easier
It's
because
sort
I'm
of
sure
an
it's
sort of an even split. It's sort of an even split,
mm,
but if you have a really simple project, like for instance, if I make like a project with a couple characters and small environment and stuff like that, then proportionally speaking, I'm gonna spend more time in Maya
mm-hmm,
because, animation cleanup. But let's say I have a very expansive area. So
right
uh, let's say a large mountain range, detailed rock slides, stuff like that. So it's sort of going for a full photoreal appearance. Then I'm gonna spend a much larger amount of time in Unreal.
right
But then again, if I have a simple environment and I have a lot of animation, then I'm gonna spend more time in Maya. For instance, when it came to making my enemy, which was like 16 minutes of just raw anime, like content, raw
bananas
content. I've probably went with like almost an even split between the two.
yeah
So because I had to
that's
make
yeah
like I had to design the environments in Unreal,
right
I had to make a lot of effects. I had to work a lot with shaders, and I've actually, you know, I used a separate toolkit for my facial mocap because I don't have an iPhone,
mm,
so that didn't really come in handy for in my case. So I had to use a separate set of tools which worked with Unreal. Then I spent more time in Unreal.
right
So like that's an additional part of proportionate time in Unreal. But then again, I had to do a lot of motion capture cleanup in Maya. So I think that was sort of an even split. And by the end of it, I had like 150, 200 animations, just main animations. So I'm not counting like, okay, there's a character and the gun animation. I'm counting that as one.
mm-hmm, right
So
yeah
it
so
was
it's
like
actually a
200
lot
by the
more
end of it.
right
Yeah.
yeah just of
I mean, it was a 6-month long production. So
yeah I mean 60 minutes is banana it's crazy I mean that's
yeah.
it's yeah it's crazy can you I think the only other I mean I don't know I think we can kind of wrap it up you've given us a solid 2 hours but also do think it's interesting how you were talking about how you try to do things in a realistic manner and like even I when I'm doing things in Unreal, I don't pay attention at all to the luminosity of the sky. I'm like, it's done, it's fine. But could you talk about why you do that and like to the extent you were talking about cameras, you were talking about sunlight, you're talking about certainly I think scale. Like your, I'm sure Master Chief is probably like exactly the right height.
Oh yeah,
Um,
is
yeah,
exactly
right. To the
213
centimeter. Yeah, to the
centimeters tall.
lore specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is that, have you always done that? Is that something you realized that you were getting better quality from being really
I
consistent?
adopted that workflow, I think, after I made my first Halo Unreal animation. So the first time I used the smart suit, I think back then I still used like sort of like the arbitrary values within Unreal.
Right.
For so like my sunlight was like 10 lux strong, for
Right.
instance. But or 10 lux bright. But I started experimenting with handling the whole thing more closely akin to how you would handle it in real life. You know, like you have, and that means you have sometimes have to use like crazy values for like brightness and all
Mm-hmm.
that. So you quickly go into like the thousands and tens of thousands when you talk about brightness, for instance, for like lights and emissives and stuff like that. But in like my uh, CG artist brain, somewhere in the back of it, it makes me feel satisfied to know like, okay, this is actually getting as accurate as possible to the real
Right.
world, and it sort of like helps, in like dialing all that in, because now I can use correct ISO values like for my cameras.
Yeah, totally. I mean that's a reason alone because I mean lots of people talk about that, right? And that the more that you can treat a digital camera like you would treat a real life camera, even in how it's positioned or how you think about it, how it moves, right? That
Yeah,
we people are so media literate now that we know what should look right and what doesn't. And yeah, that's really interesting that using proper values for the environment allows it's like not even about it's because it's going through the lens of a camera. And so
yeah,
right, because in the end you're rendering from a camera, right, which ostensibly is using all the same settings like ISO and aperture. And then if you're looking at reference, you can be like, well, what would a camera do in this low light situation? And I don't know. It seems yeah, it
exactly.
makes sense that you get a much more realistic look in the end.
Yeah, yeah, and also that like makes you adapt to certain conditions, like how you would in real life. So if I change the aperture, I'm gonna get either more or
Right.
less light in my frame, or like in my sensor. So now I have to adjust the ISO or the exposure values and stuff like that, and it makes the whole thing just okay. It's a bit more tedious. Like okay, you can just adjust the aperture and then be done with it. You
Right.
know, you have to adjust the exposure as well, but those small dial-ins, it it sort of makes the whole thing feel a bit more real, at least for
Mm-hmm.
me, and that's why I choose to do things that way.
No, I think it totally does make everything feel more real. I think again, it's like one of those things where people they're like me, including me. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing all this amazing stuff from Unreal 5. Like it's on easy mode. Like I hop in, and why am I not getting like a photorealistic result like I'm seeing in whatever the render that I'm looking at? And I think oftentimes it does come down to that you if you want a photorealistic look, you gotta like pay attention to how it would look in reality, and that's
Yeah,
what that's why you use reference, and that's why you dial in those settings correctly. That's why you use things that are at the proper scale because like a certain you know um, film like the lens um, God, I always forget this goddamn word. But if you're at 18 millimeters versus 25 versus 80 versus
yeah,
120, like the scale of your world corresponds to how that camera would look, and so
yeah.
yeah, it all plays into each other.
And
Yeah,
just one last thing to bring up
yeah,
about like going for realism, Unreal. One thing I see is Unreal's base post-processing settings are good, but sometimes they give like a really heavily contrasted image. So it's like way too contrasty. I can't really say it in any other fashion. And one thing I have realized that helps is if you tweak these settings first, because it really helps. The in the post process volume, you have the film back
Mm.
settings, and the default is set to be like the ACES system, like
Oh,
the
interesting.
Academy color correction
Yeah.
system or something like that. But what you see here is it's like really heavy when it comes to contrast,
Right.
and it sort of, for me at least, makes the image like too much in a sense. Like, okay, this is the colors are too heavy, the darks are too dark, the brights are too bright. It's like
Right.
not really looking that good. But if you tweak these settings, you can decrease the contrast, edit it a bit, and sometimes what I do is set the shoulder up to 1, set the toe and the slope to a good 0.5. That way I
So you're
have
getting
like
a
this
raw look.
logarithmic. Yeah,
Right.
yes, I'm getting the logarithmic look, and then I tweak from that.
Yeah. Because I'm sure
So
you have
see,
a whole
just like,
layer of color correction that goes on at the end anyway, and you want to tweak that at that point.
yeah,
That's
but I
so
get like
interesting.
90% of the color correction in Unreal, and if you compare this to the default,
Yeah.
it produces a richer image.
Yeah.
If
Absolutely.
you just decrease back to the logarithmic and then go from there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because you have much more dynamic range, essentially. You know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it also helps you visualize like what's in my scene.
Right. I can see in the shadow now a little bit
Yeah,
more.
yeah, I can see in the shadow, I can dial it in to make it visible.
Yeah.
And the way I go about this is set everything back to a point 0.5. Okay,
Right.
for this base level, I don't have it that dialed in, but set everything back to a point 0.5 and the shoulder to a 1, and then toy around with the global settings to get an overall nice feel, and then I can go to my shadows, midtones, and highlights and just fine tune it.
That's crazy how saturated it is too in the default settings because that's
Yeah,
often I think with CG is like the world is not saturated like the way that it
yeah,
is in CG. It's like we don't have you just the pure green does not like exist in the world. It never
yeah,
does. If you ever see anything saturated in CG too much, it's like, whoa, let's pull that way back because it just
yeah,
in the real world things aren't they aren't that intense. They everything
yeah.
is like 80% most at saturation. I'm just looking around at things. Yeah.
I've actually like went to a like a 3D generalist and Maya generalist training, got certified, stuff like that before I started like working like this. I started experimenting beforehand, then I finished high school, went to this training and course and got my certification, and that was like one of the key points that my instructor highlighted is that you don't have a full one saturation, you don't have a full one brightness, you don't have a
Never.
zero
Right.
like that's
Yeah.
that's non-existent. You can toy around with it, like for artistic purposes. Of course, you can break the bounds of reality,
Right.
but if you want to go for a full-on realism, you don't really have that.
Yeah. That's I was in school for VFX too, and that was I had one teacher who would always they would open up your values and be like, "Why is this at 1?" Like it
Yeah,
will never be at 1. That it should never be all the way cranked to the right. That does not work. Like it just
but
that's not it just doesn't look that way. Yeah.
to be fair, sometimes there are like inconsistencies in how a software like displays things.
Mhm.
You can get that. You can break things if you want to,
Right. Yeah.
and sometimes using those values is great. Like it works, and the reasoning behind that, at least from my end, CG needs to look good before the physical values behind it are like fully, realized. You have to make something that looks real, not
Mhm.
works based on real life under the hood. If it looks real and it convinces everyone that it's real, but in the end
Yeah.
it's CG, but okay, one value is offset,
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
and you should go for that. You should go for that. So,
Right.
small detours, go for it.
Yeah. And I mean,
But
I think
going
yeah.
for full on realism gives you a great base, and then you
Yeah.
can work from that base on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think the extra layer on top that's always so funny is that, like, there's people who talk about. I was watching the Corridor Digital behind the scenes on Water for Shang-Chi, the
Yeah.
Marvel movie that and like a bunch of people have always talked about this, but because we're so media literate and we have seen so many movies, there's like a bunch of specific things that like you have to do in VFX that is not accurate to how
Yeah,
it works in real life, but people are used to seeing explosions work this way. And so you show them something that's actually real and they're like that looks fake. You're like, "Well,
yeah,
no, that's how it looks." And you're missing the point at that point because you're not trying to make something that's real. You're trying to make something that like reads as movie real and how people expect it
yeah,
to work. And
exactly.
that's always funny too because you're like, "Well, that's not real." And it's like, well, that doesn't matter. It's about the reality of like the film, and yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, because
I think.
sometimes you have to put story first instead of like realism, you know.
Right. Yeah. Or
Like a
it's not a
story,
documentary.
emotion, concept,
Yeah.
those sometimes have to come first, like before realism.
Yeah. 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 It's easy to get hung up on that realism and be like, this is the way it should be, and you're like, well, it doesn't read right, and so change
Yeah,
it. That's fine. It doesn't have to be real.
yeah.
Um. Okay, well, I think we're gonna close this down. This was awesome, Loacher. Thank you so much for doing this. Really,
It's
I
been
could,
my pleasure, honestly. It's been a
yeah,
while since I've talked this extensively about this stuff, so it's been fun.
yeah. It's
It's been
hard to
good fun.
find. I have a difficult. My wife doesn't like to talk to me about global illumination. I'm like, let me tell you something really exciting. And she's like, yeah, okay, I appreciate that you are excited about this, but I'm like telling my friends about minutia of mocap retargeting, and they're like, I don't know any of these words, and I'm
Yeah.
not interested in hearing about it. Yeah. So it was great. I'm super interested in it. I'm gonna go try the override thing right now. And again, we're gonna repost all of this in 4K, and so you'll be able to see all your settings that you're tweaking. And thank you in the chat. Thank you, Echelon. It was
Yeah.
super fun to yeah. Thank you, Dutch. You Monk. Thanks everyone for tuning in. It was great. Uh, yeah, and we'll repost it in high quality soon, so you'll be able to see everything a little bit better. And Loacher, hopefully we'll do this again. And I can't wait to see what you're gonna do for the perfect
Absolutely.
loop.
As I said, I've got a backlog of things I can talk about, so
That would be
hit
great.
me up.
Yeah, okay, we will, because I think it'd be fun. Next time we can do maybe an animation challenge or something, and we'll do something like
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're gonna sign off, and Loacher, just stick around for a second afterwards, and we'll let it upload. And thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for being here, guys. See ya.